Hello, welcome to another History Burst video. This one's going to look at conflict with Spain. We're going to start off by looking at why conflict broke out in the first place. So the conflict between England and Spain was caused by political, religious and commercial rivalry. Now, under Mary Tudor, Spain and England were allies, and as a Protestant country under Elizabeth I, England's relationship with Spain deteriorated. Philip II, backed by the Pope, saw Protestantism as a threat to the authority of the Catholic Church. Many English Protestants saw Spain and Catholicism as a threat, and Philip II of Spain became involved in Catholic plots against Elizabeth. Philip II had been married to Elizabeth's half-sister, Mary Tudor, and after Mary died, Philip proposed to Elizabeth in 1559, but she declined him because he was a Catholic. Rivalry between Spain and England got worse owing to the Spanish policy in the Netherlands. The Netherlands had been Spanish since the 15th century, but a Protestant revolt was brutally put down by the Duke of Alba in 1567. And by 1585, following the Treaty of Nonsuch, England was providing assistance to the Dutch rebels, and Dutch ships, known as the Sea Beggars, attacked Spanish ships and then were allowed to shelter in English ports. By the 1560s, England and Spain were commercial rivals, competing against each other for access to the markets and resources of the New World, as well as the markets in Turkey, Europe, Russia, China, and North Africa. At the same time, the Spanish control of the New World denied English merchants profit-making opportunities because all the trade there had to be licensed by the Spanish government. Spain had conquered Mexico and Peru in the early 1500s, and this provided the Spanish government with vast amounts of gold and silver, which were regularly shipped back to Spain. It also gave Spain control over the trade of sugarcane and tobacco. By Elizabeth's reign, sailors, including Sir Francis Drake, were journeying great distances on trading voyages to different parts of the world, and this boosted commercial rivalry between England and Spain as English sailors were exploring and trading in areas such as the New World and the Far East, which the Spanish claimed as their territory. Commercial rivalry led to a conflict when Spanish control of the Netherlands prevented English goods accessing Antwerp and the Scheldt estuary. This reduced English trade with Europe and therefore the profits of the English merchants. Under the Treaty of Tordesillas of 1494, the right to explore and trade in the New World was given to Spain and Portugal. This gave Spain control of trade in the New World. English trade and exploration in the region was seen as a challenge to Spanish dominance there. Now, by the 1570s, English privateers such as Hawkins and Drake were attacking Spanish treasure ships, carrying gold and silver across the Atlantic. By the 1580s, these attacks by privateers were costing Spain hugely. When Drake returned to England after his circumnavigation of the globe, he did so with £400,000 of Spanish treasure. Typically, private investors, including the Queen, provided money and funding to pay for the expeditions and were repaid with a proportion of the looted treasure. By knighting Drake in 1581, Elizabeth demonstrated her support for English privateers, as well as her hostility towards Spain's commercial interests in Europe and the New World. And Philip II viewed Drake and other privateers as pirates who should be removed by war if necessary, and this would protect Spain's commercial interests. We're going to look at naval warfare, tactics and technology. Now, England's war with Spain was characterised by naval actions including privateering and attacks on Spanish bases. Now, privateers attacked Spanish colonies, which were foreign countries ruled by Spain, and bases in both Europe and the Pacific from the 1560s to the 1580s. In 1568, an expedition led by John Hawkins was heavily defeated in the Caribbean, and all except 2 of his ships were destroyed. From 1572 to 1573, Francis Drake successfully raided the Spanish colony of Panama, seizing gold and silver. During his circumnavigation of the globe between 1577 and 1580, Drake's attacks on Spanish bases in the Pacific and the Canaries resulted in the capture of gold, silver, and Spanish coins, or pieces of 8, or pesos. In 1587, Drake attacked Spanish ships at Cadiz in southern Spain, and this was his most devastating attack on the Spanish, with 30 Spanish ships destroyed and many captured. Now this delayed and weakened the Spanish Armada that sailed in 1588. Now this is Drake's own map of the Spanish attack on Cadiz in 1587. The attack became known as the singeing of the King of Spain's beard, and as we've already said, delayed the departure of the Spanish Armada. By the 1570s, English tactics were starting to change. The English had mounted a number of small cannons on their ships which could be reloaded quickly. The plan was to get as close as possible to Spanish vessels and fire devastating rounds of shot, just small lead balls, into their ships, causing the wood to splinter and leading to casualties. The English had to get close enough to cause damage, but not close enough to allow the Spanish to board their ships. And since 1573, the English shipyards had produced ships that had full rigging or sails, allowing them to manoeuvre more easily among enemy ships before sinking or disabling them using cannons. This picture is an English galleon, and these were superior to the Spanish ships because they were swifter and easier to manoeuvre. Now the Spanish practiced a convoy system, with treasure ships travelling in a large group of other ships for protection. For privateers to seize these ships, they would have to board them, and the Spanish prevented this by sinking the privateer ships or boarding them first. To board and capturing the ships, the Spanish had to get as close as possible. To sink the ships, the Spanish ships carried cannons, but these were relatively large and could not easily be reloaded. The Spanish were also unable to sustain their fire against English ships. Spanish tactics both against the Dutch and the English were defensive. They protected treasure ships and escorted troops at sea, so English privateers preferred to attack bases after the treasure had been unloaded. So as we've mentioned, the raid on Cadiz slowed down the Spanish Armada. We're going to look at why it is that the Spanish Armada ends up being defeated. So the threat posed by the Spanish Armada of 1588 was very real. The invasion by a powerful Catholic country and the removal of Elizabeth from power. The Armada was defeated for a number of reasons. So what actually happened? So on the 29th of July, the English spotted the Armada sailing up the English Channel. On the 31st of July, there was the Battle of Plymouth. This is where 2 Spanish ships were captured. Following this, on the 3rd and 4th of August, there was the Battle of the Isle of Wight, and Spanish ships were outgunned by the English and forced to move further up the Channel towards Calais. And on the 8th of August, we have the Battle of Gravelines, and 5 ships caused the Spanish to panic. The Spanish fleet never linked up with the Duke of Parma and was scattered. This map just shows the route that was taken by the Spanish Armada. So you can see they sail up the Channel where they are attacked by the English Navy. They then disperse and sail around the British Isles where they're caught by the weather and they're dispersed. Why did it fail? The first was communication problems. There was no communication between the Duke of Parma and the Duke of Medina Sidonia. There were no deep water ports. The Dutch rebels still possessed Ostend, and this meant the Spanish Armada could not stop at any ports in the Spanish Netherlands, but had to meet up with the Duke of Parma's army at sea after it had embarked on a series of smaller ships. This made communication very difficult. The Spanish ships lacked supplies and provisions, including food for a long voyage. The Spanish fleet was at sea for 10 weeks, and by early August the food had rotted. This damaged Spanish morale and their ability to fight the English. English ships were better armed and equipped. In English ships, cannons were mounted on smaller gun carriages than on Spanish ships. This meant they could be reloaded and fired more quickly than the Spanish cannons. This firepower damaged many Spanish ships and undermined their chances of linking up with the Duke of Parma and invading England. The English tactics were superior. The English got close enough to the Spanish ships to fire on them, but stayed far enough away to prevent Spanish sailors and soldiers from boarding. This destroyed and damaged a number of Spanish ships while ensuring the English losses were minimal. Drake's use of fire ships at the Battle of Gravelines was also important. It caused the Spanish to panic. The key turning point seems to have been the Battle of Gravelines, where the English used fire ships and many Spanish captains panicked, put their anchors and allowed their ships to drift into the North Sea. This meant the Spanish ships were forced to make a dangerous journey around the British Isles, resulting in the loss of ships and crew. And the last reason was that the weather was particularly bad. Gale force winds caused most of the destruction to the Spanish ships as they were retreated home. Many Spanish ships were destroyed off the west of Ireland. That brings us to the end of the Elizabethan topic.